Welcome to Grief Sucks Life After Loss, where we talk all things grief. Thanks for being with us today, and we hope you enjoy this episode. Hi, Debbie. Thank you for being here.
Hi, thank you so much for having me as a guest.
You are here to share your story, which unfortunately is familiar to a lot of people.
Yeah, excuse me. Unfortunately, it is. Um, yeah, so it really all started with my oldest son. He was my oldest of three. His name was Alex, and most of his childhood was really normal. He was like a great soccer player. He was just a natural, and I mean, he had a lot of friends and he made friends everywhere he went. And he was like super close with my other two kids, which they were all 20 months apart. And everything seemed, really normal in his childhood. And nothing could have prepared me for a conversation that we would have when he was 17 years old in my bedroom. And in that conversation, he described exactly how he wanted to kill himself.
Goodness.
He wanted to hang himself with a belt, and he described how he had tried and, had attempted just that. And I just remember like feeling like my heart stopped, and this can't be happening, and not this easygoing, talented, outgoing child. And this trajectory really changed our lives right in that instant. And then came an almost month long hospitalization where he was diagnosed with something called schizoaffective disorder. And at the time, I had never even heard of it. I knew nothing at all about it. And he was, while he was in the hospital, I just scrambled to learn as much as I possibly could. And for the next 9 years, I worked to support him. And he was still there, but it was really difficult because he became addicted to drugs and alcohol. I almost lost him several times to overdose or to suicide. There were so many hospitalizations, treatment center stays. I had many sleepless nights in tears. Just really afraid for him and for what was going to happen next. And I mean, the stress and anxiety just made me physically ill. And sometimes even his actions were different. Like our relationship changed. Like he would lash out at me and he'd apologize afterwards, but that was hard. And maybe about 2.5 years into his diagnosis, I realized that if I didn't find a path to my own peace, I would become consumed with his illness, his drug use, the hospitalizations, the treatment center stays, and just everything. And I just had this moment of realization where I knew I had a choice. I could either continue to focus on the fear or on the peace. And I chose faith over fear, and I began to make changes. I had this really strong need for certainty, for just knowing like that my kids, that everything was going to be okay, and that, nothing bad was going to happen. And I realized there really isn't. We don't have control over that. There is no certainty beyond ourselves. And so instead of focusing on certainty, I replaced that with contribution to others. And it really helped me to, whether it was helping others through, at that point, I then became a life coach, whether it was helping other people like that, or whether it was helping my friends or my family, my children. I just kind of threw myself into focusing on contribution to others. And instead of trying to control Alex, because I really couldn't control
Yeah.
him, I focused on things I could do, such as advocating for him, just loving him, being a support, being his biggest support. And I had to work on acceptance, accepting kind of the lot that he was given, that the impact on our family. And that kind of helped free a struggle within me. I think I was trying to fight against it for a few years, and that obviously wasn't working.
As a mom, it's hard not to, though.
It was so hard. It was just this struggle all the time, and it was like an inner struggle, and I couldn't have peace until I really had that acceptance. And even before losing him, I actually had to do grief, because I had to grieve the life that we had before his illness and addiction, because everything was different. Our lives were different, our relationship was different. And, the hopes and dreams I had for him were different. I mean, he was such a great soccer player. He ended up doing track and cross country in high school, and we thought he was going to go on to college and, like, do college track and everything. And, he loved genetics, and he wanted to, like, do that when he would for a career when he grew up. And, none of this was able to happen. And, it was just a grieving process, really. And, I didn't actually realize that at first. And so that was an important piece. And
Mhm.
then on January 6th of 2022, I received a phone call, that my son Alex had been found dead. He had been dead a day by then, so it was January 5th when he passed. And at that point, he was only 26 years old.
Oh my goodness.
And I felt, just pain like I had never experienced before. And I remember just, like, as I tried to listen to the police officer on the phone, I just felt like my world was just collapsing around me. And I remember asking if I could get my parents on the phone, and I'm not sure why. Maybe I think now I wasn't able to absorb everything he was saying, and I thought, well, maybe my parents would be able to absorb more. And you know, in those early days, I had no idea how I would go on.
Mhm.
And I spent the early weeks and months in my bed. I mean, I that was sort of my home base, and I did everything from my bed. I worked from my bed. I ended up writing a book from my bed. I literally, I mean, I'd get out of bed to, like, maybe cook for the week or something, and then I'd eat in the bed. I mean, it was my comfort, and I was really big on, like, taking good care of myself, and being gentle on myself.
Mhm.
Not too long after, maybe just a couple of months after losing him, I remember receiving an email about a writing workshop. And even though at the time I didn't think I had the capacity to even focus or listen, something just made me sign up. And by the end, I knew that I was supposed to write a book sharing my story of the love and loss of my son through his mental illness and addiction. And that became my focus for the next 6 months, like, really just working on writing that book. And it really connected me
Mhm.
with my son. And, many sleepless nights, the memories and the ideas and the stories that I was going to share in the book just all flowed to me overnight, as if, my son was right there helping me write it. And it was early on like that I knew that it was my purpose to be able to help other parents navigating similar challenges. Early on, it was to help parents who had a child with mental illness and addiction. And because I was already a certified life and relationship coach. And then I later got my certification as a certified grief educator from David Kessler. and so that I would be able to then help other parents who lost a child. And I call this my purpose work, and being able to help others on a similar journey, it not only gives my life meaning and purpose, but it also helps make me feel connected to my son. I feel like
Mhm.
he always loved doing nice things for people, and he always wanted to help, and he wasn't always able to help because of his illness and because of his addiction, but he wanted to and he tried to. And so I feel like he's helping now through me, and I love that. um Life just doesn't, it doesn't always give us what we expect. And through my journey, I did learn how to be present and cherish each opportunity that I was given, and just spend time on what's truly important, and be intentional about how I spend that time. And now I help others do the same, and it's really rewarding for me.
Do you have any advice for maybe parents or loved ones that are going through um, dealing with the situations of illnesses and or addictions? Because I would imagine it's a lonely road. You feel like, you're alone, and how do you handle this, or what do you do? Also a feeling of helplessness, because at the end of the day, there's really not a lot you can do.
Yeah, there really isn't. And a lot of parents just kind of forget about taking care of themselves. And you can't be a full, you can't show up and fully support your child if you can't take care of yourself. Also, the better position that you're in, the more you take care of yourself, the easier it is for you to deal with these crises that happen, because unfortunately, there are crises. I mean, my life was full of them. There were scares. There was, the ICU calling in the middle of the night. There were just so many different things that came up. And yes, they're hard to deal with, but you're going to be in a much worse place if you aren't taking good care of yourself. And then I would say, the other thing that's so important is to try to put yourself into their shoes and see things from their perspective, not in their shoes from your perspective. But their brain isn't thinking in the same way that somebody without mental illness and addiction. And if they're making decisions you don't like, and or if they're lashing out and blaming you, it's not personal. And so really just kind of having, like, really connecting with that compassion so that you can really be a loving support. Sometimes it's easy to get caught up in the, he's not behaving, he's saying things that are upsetting, he's not making good decisions, or she, I say he, my son, but he or she. And it's you have to realize that they're not functioning in the same way that somebody who has a healthier brain is functioning. So it is a difference, whether they're on medication or not. Even if they're taking medication and that medication is helping some of their symptoms, the medication is still doing things with their brain. They are still having side effects from the medication. So, it can be really difficult. And I have a podcast as well, and I believe it was my last episode interviewed somebody who has she's a director at a center in Florida that all of the residents either have schizoaffective disorder, schizophrenia, or bipolar. And she really talked about what it's like for them inside of their brain, and how, a lot of times with these disorders, it's really hard to block out, like, things. Like, think about if you were in this really noisy environment and you were hearing all kinds of voices, and then you were trying to like focus and do things, and it can just make life really difficult. And so, just maybe doing some, educating yourself, and just really tapping into that compassion and understanding for your child. And the other thing is still having boundaries, still having boundaries for yourself, but make sure I always say boundaries with love. Make sure they're loving boundaries and not like a wall that you're putting up between you and your child. Make sure they're boundaries with love so that they are sort of protecting your well-being. And they're going to allow you to be, show up as a better parent.
Could you tell us more about your book?
Yeah, absolutely. My book is basically, I share my journey of the 9-year battle of my son's mental illness and addiction from the perspective of how I dealt with it as a parent. I share about when he first came to me and he was suicidal, and described how, how he wanted to kill himself, and how that impacted me and our family, and how I navigated that, that long initial hospitalization. And it also talks about, how I dealt with the times that I almost lost him. It goes into some of the specific times when things happened in our lives. It reads as a memoir, but it does share about how I got through this journey. So it really talks about, all the different things I went through, and how it impacted his siblings as well. And,
Mhm.
we were also close. Me and Alex and his two siblings, the four of us were very close because their father wasn't really in the picture much at all. And we were divorced. So as a single mom, it's like, how I went through this journey, when I kind of had that, a few years in, that realization that I needed to make a choice between staying in the fear or choosing
Mhm.
peace, and how I got through that. And I talked about some of his later years and how we were able to just, accept him the way he was. And, we would get together as a family, all of my children and me. And there were many times, in fact, most of the times, where he was not sober. But we accepted and loved him. We had to accept that he wasn't making the choices that we would have loved him to make, but we were able to enjoy him anyway. And I was so grateful for that, because when I lost him, I could at least say that I had this beautiful relationship with him. I had all these memories that I could cherish. And the book also kind of goes into approximately the first year, maybe about 9 months after his death. So I talk about getting that phone call and what life was like in the very early stages, and then, a few months out, and things that I did kind of during that first 9 months that were helpful for me. And the reason it was limited to 9 months is because basically it was at that time that I finished writing the book, and I gave it to the editor. So I had to stop at some point. I
Yeah.
knew one day I would write another book focusing more on grief and after losing him and everything. But so that's why it only goes about maybe 9 months or so. But I wrote it so that other parents won't feel alone, and they will have hope for peace and healing for themselves. And I know it was really helpful for me when I first lost my son. When I started reading memoirs that were written by parents who had lost a child. And that was really helpful for me, because there weren't friends in my everyday life that had been through the similar experience. And so to be able to connect with others through reading their story was really powerful for me. And I know that when I was going through the stuff with my son's mental illness and addiction, I would have loved to have a memoir like that to read.
Right.
So that's why I wanted to do this, to help parents.
And what about your podcast?
Yeah, my podcast. So there's two audiences. It's called Finding Peace Beyond the Pain. And there's two audiences. So the audiences are parents who have lost a child, and then the other audience is parents who have a child with mental illness and or addiction. And so it's kind of divided. Some of the guests are experts, some of the guests are sharing their story, and some of them are on loss of a child, and some are on mental illness, some are on addiction. And it's meant to give parents information that they need, give them tools, maybe listen to how other parents got through similar situations and what worked for them. I mean, everybody's different. The same things are not necessarily going to work for everybody, but you still might take away, a nugget that would be helpful. So, yeah.
Well, I love that you are on this journey of helping other people. I think it's important for us to come together as a community and talk about these things, because these are things people don't like to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely.
I will link in the description your websites for your book and for your coaching, and the link to your podcast as well, so everybody can get that easily. And before we go, tell us some of your favorite memories with your son.
Oh gosh. Okay. I have so many, but one of my favorite memories was when he loved to play soccer, and he played travel soccer. And I remember there was one game where it was tied in overtime. And so they were going to keep playing until somebody scored a goal, and he kicked the winning goal, and the teammates like picked him up in the air, and I was like crying. I was like, tears were coming down my face, like happy tears.
Yeah.
So that was just it just sticks out in my mind. He just loved soccer so much, and all of his, like, when he was kind of growing up, for Christmases and birthdays, he always wanted soccer jerseys. So I actually have one of his soccer jerseys now that I kept to remember him. It was the only one I could find. I don't know what happened to the others.
At least you have one.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to leave us with tonight?
Just to say that I feel like life is really precious, and we never know how much time we or anybody else around us has. And that's why I just learned how important it is to spend time with the people that you love, and let them know that you love them. And I do remember my son and I and my other kids, we never say goodbye to each other without saying I love you, without exchanging I love yous. And I just think it's so important, because you just never know.
It is. Say I love you, make all the memories, and spend as much time as you can with each other. Debbie, thank you for coming on and sharing your story with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me as a guest. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. We hope you enjoyed our conversation today. If you would like to join us on Facebook, you can find us at Grief Sucks, Life After Loss. We look forward to seeing you again.